This TSA agent had been working security for over a decade. Quiet, professional, never caused any drama. Just checked bags, scanned passengers, went home. But when three suspicious men tried to smuggle something deadly onto Flight 447, his training from 20 years ago kicked in. And what he accomplished in those crucial 8 minutes? It's the reason 347 people made it home to their families that night. So, Denver International Airport. This place processes over 69 million passengers every year, okay? We're talking about one of the busiest airports in America, with security checkpoints that handle thousands of people every single day. But nothing, and I mean nothing, had prepared the morning shift for what went down on that Tuesday in March. Robert "Bobby" Martinez had been working TSA security for 12 years straight. Same checkpoint, same shift, same methodical approach to his job. 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., Tuesday through Saturday. The guy was like clockwork, never late, never complained, never caused problems. He'd scan bags, check IDs, ask people to remove their shoes and laptops. Routine stuff, you know? Now here's the thing about Bobby. He was quiet in a way that most people just accepted. Not unfriendly, but focused, professional. When coworkers would chat during slow periods, Bobby would just nod politely and keep his attention on the X-ray monitor. When passengers got frustrated about wait times or security procedures, he'd respond with calm, consistent professionalism. "Bobby's solid," his supervisor Sarah Chen would tell new hires. 12 years, never missed a day, never had a complaint filed against him. If you want to learn how to do this job right, watch how Bobby works. But what Sarah didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Bobby Martinez hadn't always been Bobby Martinez. 23 years earlier, he'd been Staff Sergeant Roberto Martinez, 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Battalion. 3 deployments to Afghanistan, 2 to Iraq. Combat operations in places that didn't make the evening news, hunting high-value targets in mountains and urban environments where one mistake meant death for his entire team. Bobby had earned his combat infantry badge the hard way, leading raids on terrorist compounds, identifying threats from behavioral patterns that most people couldn't even see. But after 8 years of war, after watching too many friends come home in flag-draped coffins, he'd made a choice. No more combat, no more violence, just a quiet job where he could use his skills to protect people without having to. The morning started like every other morning. Bobby arrived at 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes early as always. He checked his equipment, reviewed the overnight security briefings, and took his position at Checkpoint B, the one that handled most of the international departures. By 7:30 a.m., the usual rush was building. Business travelers heading to morning meetings, families starting vacation trips, the normal mix of passengers that Bobby had seen thousands of times before. He was scanning bags with the same methodical attention he'd maintained for 12 years, occasionally flagging items for hand inspection, keeping the line moving efficiently. That's when he noticed them. 3 men traveling together, but trying not to look like they were traveling together. They'd approached the checkpoint from different directions, got in different lines, but Bobby had caught the subtle eye contact between them. Professional eye contact. Tactical eye contact. The first thing that caught his attention was their breathing. All 3 were controlling their breathing in a specific way. The kind of controlled breathing someone uses when they're trying to manage stress and maintain focus under pressure. Not the nervous breathing of someone afraid to fly, but the deliberate breathing of someone preparing for action. The second thing was their positioning. They'd instinctively spaced themselves so they could see all the security personnel, all the exits, and each other. Classic Overwatch positioning. The kind of tactical awareness that comes from training, not paranoia. Bobby's combat instincts, dormant for 12 years, began to wake up. The first man approached Bobby's station, Abdul Hassan, according to his passport. Pakistani citizen, businessman, traveling to Los Angeles on legitimate documents that Bobby's trained eye immediately recognized as high-quality forgeries. The photo matched. The stamps looked authentic. But something about the passport itself was wrong. Too new for someone who claimed to travel internationally for business. Too perfect. "Purpose of your trip to Los Angeles?" Bobby asked, his voice calm and professional. "Business meetings," Hassan replied. His English was good, accent consistent with his supposed background. But his eyes were wrong. They were scanning, evaluating, calculating. Soldier's eyes. Bobby scanned Hassan's carry-on bag. Laptop, business documents, toiletries. Nothing unusual on the X-ray. But when he opened the bag for manual inspection, he caught a scent. Hassan's reaction was subtle, but telling. A slight tension in his shoulders, a micro-expression of concern that lasted maybe half a second. Most people would never notice it, but Bobby had been trained to spot tells in people who were trying to kill him. The laptop appeared normal, standard business model, appropriately used. But when Bobby powered it on, the boot sequence was wrong. Too fast, too clean. This wasn't a computer used for business. This was a computer that had been wiped and configured for a specific purpose. "What kind of business are you in?" Bobby asked casually. "Import/export, textiles mostly." Bobby nodded and handed back the laptop. But he didn't hand back the bag. Instead, he made a notation on his clipboard and said, "I need to have this checked by my supervisor. Just routine. Please step aside for a moment." Hassan's eyes flicked toward his two companions, still in other lines. It was just a glance, maybe a quarter second, but it confirmed Bobby's worst suspicions. These weren't three random passengers. They were a team. While Hassan waited, Bobby activated a predetermined signal system that TSA had drilled but never expected to use. He adjusted his radio microphone in a specific way. 2 quick touches that alerted Central Command to a potential threat without making any verbal communication. The second man, identifying himself as Malik Okafor from Nigeria, approached the adjacent station operated by Jenny Walsh, a 5-year TSA veteran. Bobby watched from his peripheral vision as Jenny conducted her standard screening. Okafor was better at hiding his stress responses than Hassan. But Bobby could see the tactical awareness in his positioning, the way he kept track of security personnel locations. The third man, claiming to be David Kim from South Korea, was in the line furthest from Bobby. Too far to observe directly, but close enough for Bobby to note his general behavior. Like the others, he was calm but alert in a way that suggested professional training. Bobby's mind was running threat assessments automatically. 3 men, likely armed or carrying dangerous materials, professionally trained, attempting to board flights during peak travel hours. The implications were terrifying. But here's the thing. Bobby couldn't just sound an alarm based on behavioral observations and his gut instincts. He needed evidence. In the post-9/11 world, airport security had protocols for handling suspicious behavior. But those protocols required specific justifications. And if Bobby was wrong, if these were just nervous business travelers, he could destroy innocent lives and end his own career. So he did what... While Hassan waited for supervisory review, Bobby began coordinating with his team using hand signals and radio codes that sounded like routine communication, but were actually tactical instructions. He alerted Jenny Walsh to pay extra attention to Okafor. He signaled to Tom Rodriguez at the far checkpoint to flag David Kim for additional screening. What Bobby was doing wasn't in any TSA manual. This was counter-terrorism tactics, adapted for a civilian environment. Jenny Walsh found it first. Hidden in a compartment of Okafor's laptop bag was a small device that looked like a portable phone charger. But when she examined it more closely, Something felt wrong about the weight distribution. The device was heavier than it should be, and when she shook it gently, she could hear something moving inside. "Bobby?" she called softly. "Can you take a look at this?" Bobby approached, maintaining his professional demeanor, while his combat instincts screamed danger. The device in Jenny's hands wasn't a phone charger. It was a detonator. Specifically, it was a remote detonation device designed to trigger multiple explosive charges simultaneously. Bobby had seen devices like this in Afghanistan, usually attached to IEDs designed to kill American soldiers. But this one was smaller, more sophisticated, designed for a different kind of target. "Sir," Bobby said to Okafor, "I need you to step back from the checkpoint. Keep your hands visible." Okafor complied, but Bobby caught the micro-movements that indicated he was preparing to run or fight. The man's weight had shifted to the balls of his feet. His arms were loose and ready for action, and his eyes were tracking escape routes. That's when Tom Rodriguez found the second device. David Kim's carry-on contained what appeared to be a standard tablet computer. But when Tom examined it more closely, he realized the tablet had been hollowed out and filled with plastic explosives. Not enough to bring down a building, but more than enough to destroy an aircraft in flight. Bobby's radio crackled with Tom's coded report. "Checkpoint 7. Possible device. Need immediate supervisor assistance. 3 men, 3 devices." This wasn't random. This was a coordinated attack plan. Bobby made a decision that would save 347 lives. "Code 7. All checkpoints," Bobby spoke into his radio. "Immediate lockdown. Security breach in progress." Code 7 wasn't standard TSA protocol. It was something Bobby had developed in his own mind, based on military emergency procedures. It meant active threat, multiple hostiles, potential catastrophic event. Within 30 seconds, the entire checkpoint area was sealed. Blast doors that most passengers didn't even... Hassan, Okafor, and Kim immediately recognized what was happening. Their cover was blown, their mission was compromised, and they were trapped in a controlled environment with professional security personnel who were now treating them as hostile combatants. Hassan made the first move, reaching into his jacket for what Bobby immediately recognized as a trigger device. Not the remote detonators they'd hidden in their bags, but a dead man's switch designed to detonate everything if their mission failed. Bobby moved with muscle memory that was 23 years old, but still perfect. He covered the 12 feet between his position and Hassan in less than 3 seconds, using a combat approach that kept other passengers out of the line of fire. His left hand secured Hassan's wrist before the trigger could be activated, while his right hand controlled Hassan's head and neck in a restraint hold that was firm enough to prevent resistance, but careful enough not to cause permanent injury. "Device secured," Bobby called into his radio. "Need EOD and tactical support immediately." Jenny Walsh, following Bobby's lead, had moved to control Okafor using techniques she'd never learned in TSA training, but that Bobby had been quietly teaching his team for years. Not officially, not in any manual, just small suggestions about positioning and awareness that had made them all better at their jobs. Tom Rodriguez had Kim on the ground in a control hold that looked like standard arrest procedure, but was actually a combat restraint technique designed to prevent access to hidden weapons. The entire sequence took less than 2 minutes. 3 potential terrorists, neutralized without a single shot fired, without any civilian casualties, without even causing panic among the other passengers. The bomb squad arrived first, followed by FBI anti-terrorism units, followed by Homeland Security investigators who took one look at the scene and immediately knew they were dealing with something extraordinary. The devices the 3 men had been carrying were sophisticated, military-grade explosives designed to be smuggled onto aircraft and detonated simultaneously during flight. The plan, as investigators later determined, was to destroy 3 different planes departing Denver for Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago during peak travel hours. 347 people had been scheduled to board those flights. Hundreds more could have been killed if the planes had crashed in populated areas. But what amazed the investigators even more than the stopped attack was how it had been stopped. "Agent Martinez," FBI Special Agent Lisa Park said during the debriefing, "your actions today were unusual for TSA protocol."
Bobby looked up from the incident report he was writing. "I saw a threat, and I responded to neutralize it. That's my job."
"That's not exactly what I mean," Agent Park continued. "The way you identified the threat, the way you coordinated your response, the way you controlled the suspects, that's not TSA training. That's military training. Advanced military training." Bobby set down his pen. "Ma'am, I've been working airport security for 12 years. I take my job seriously." "Staff Sergeant Roberto Martinez, 75th Ranger Regiment," Agent Park read from a file. "3 Bronze Stars, 1 Silver Star, Combat Infantry Badge, 8 years of active duty, including multiple deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. Honorable discharge in 2001, after which you seemed to disappear from military records until you started working for TSA in 2012. Bobby was quiet for a long moment. That was a different life. That different life saved 347 people today. The aftermath of the incident was carefully managed. National security required that details about the attack remain classified. The 3 men were taken into federal custody and processed through the counterterrorism system. The explosive devices were analyzed and traced back to an international terror network that had been planning similar attacks at airports across the United States. But Bobby Martinez's role in stopping the attack created a problem for federal authorities. They wanted to recognize his heroism, but they also needed to maintain his cover. If Bobby's military background became public knowledge, it could compromise ongoing counterterrorism operations and make him a target for retaliation. So they offered him a choice. "We can arrange a transfer to a federal security position," Agent Park explained during a private meeting. "Better pay, better benefits, work that would make full use of your skills and experience. You'd be protecting high-value targets, conducting threat assessments, training other security personnel." Bobby considered the offer. It was everything he'd walked away from 23 years earlier. The adrenaline, the importance, the sense of purpose that came from hunting dangerous people in dangerous places. "Or," Agent Park continued, "you can stay exactly where you are. Keep doing the job you've been doing for 12 years. We'll make sure the attack never officially happened. The 3 suspects will disappear into the federal system. Your heroism will never be publicly acknowledged. You'll go back to checking bags and scanning IDs like nothing ever happened." Bobby looked out the window at the airport terminal, where thousands of passengers were moving through security checkpoints, completely unaware that their lives had been saved by a quiet TSA agent who'd been protecting them for 12 years. "I'll stay," he said quietly. "Why?" Agent Park asked. Bobby smiled. "Because this is where I'm needed." 3 months later, Bobby Martinez was back to his regular routine. Same checkpoint, same shift, same methodical approach to airport security. Most passengers who passed through his line had no idea they were being protected by someone who'd prevented one of the most devastating terrorist attacks in aviation history. His co-workers noticed some changes, though. Bobby seemed more focused, more alert. He'd always been good at his job, but now he was exceptional. He spotted concealed weapons that other agents missed. He identified suspicious behavior patterns that turned out to be legitimate security threats. He'd somehow become the best TSA agent at Denver International, and nobody could quite figure out why. Dr. Sarah Chen, his supervisor, mentioned it during his annual performance review. "Bobby, I don't know what happened to you a few months ago, but whatever it was, keep doing it. Your threat detection rate has improved by 300%. Your passenger interaction scores are perfect. You've prevented 2 weapon smuggling attempts and identified 4 people with fraudulent documents. It's like you became a completely different person overnight." Bobby smiled. "Just doing my job, ma'am." But late at night, when his shift ended and the airport was quiet, Bobby would sometimes walk through the terminal and think about the 347 people who were alive because he'd been paying attention on one particular Tuesday morning. He'd think about their families, their children, their dreams and plans and futures that would have been destroyed if 3 men with explosive devices had boarded their flights. He'd think about Hassan, Okafor, and Kim, who were now serving life sentences in federal prison for terrorism charges. About the international terror network that had been disrupted when their attack failed. About other plots that had been prevented because intelligence gathered from the Denver incident had led to arrests across 3 continents. Sometimes, when he was checking bags and scanning passengers, Bobby would catch the eye of a business traveler or a family heading on vacation. And he'd remember why he'd chosen to stay, not for recognition, not for glory, but for the quiet satisfaction of protecting people who would never know they'd been protected. Because sometimes the most important victories are the ones nobody ever hears about. And sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who make sure that tragedy never happens in the first place. 2 years after the incident, a new TSA training program was quietly implemented at airports across the United States. It was called Behavioral Threat Assessment, and it taught security personnel to identify suspicious behavior patterns, recognize signs of tactical training in passengers, and respond to potential terrorist threats using techniques that most people assumed came from law enforcement training. But the agents who developed the program knew better. They knew it came from one quiet TSA agent in Denver who'd spent 8 years in combat zones learning how to spot people who wanted to kill Americans. Bobby Martinez never officially participated in developing the training program. His name never appeared on any documents. His techniques were never formally credited to him. But every airport security agent who learned to read micro-expressions, who understood tactical positioning, who knew how to identify the behavioral signatures of someone carrying weapons or explosives, they were all learning skills that Bobby had developed in Afghanistan and Iraq and adapted for protecting civilians. 5 years after the incident, passenger security screening had improved dramatically across the entire United States. Weapon detection was up, false positives were down, and several potential terrorist attacks had been prevented by security personnel who'd learned to see what Bobby Martinez had been seeing all along. The 3 men who tried to bring down 3 aircraft had failed to kill anyone. But their failure had created something they never could have anticipated. A generation of security professionals who were trained by the techniques of a man who'd spent years hunting terrorists in their own backyard. So now I gotta ask you guys, have you ever looked at someone working an ordinary job and wondered what their story really was? That security guard, that janitor, that quiet person behind the counter who seems to see everything but says nothing. Drop a comment and tell us about a time when you realized someone was more than they appeared to be. Because here on the Human Stories, we know that heroes don't always wear uniforms, don't always get recognition, and don't always want their stories told. Sometimes they just show up every day, do their job, and make sure the rest of us get home safely. Thanks for watching, guys. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear about everyday heroes. Hit that subscribe button to help us honor the guardians who protect us in ways we never see. And the next time you go through airport security, remember Bobby Martinez. Remember that the person checking your bag might be someone who spent years learning how to spot the people who want to hurt you. Because sometimes the most important battles are fought by people whose names we'll never know, in moments we'll never see, protecting lives we'll never realize we're in danger. That's what real heroes do.
They make sure the story never has to be told.